In 1981, in prison, IRA members launched a hunger strike to gain recognition as political prisoners. 21 Irish mothers were faced with the dilemma of choosing between their son's life and their son's wishes. Some Mother's Son is the dramatized story of two of those mothers. The film stars one of Britain's most celebrated actresses, Helen Mirren, and it marks the directorial debut of Terry George. He co-wrote the screenplay for In the Name of the Father. He wrote the screenplay for this film. Both of them join me now, and I'm pleased to have them on this broadcast. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Great to have you here. Tell me about this film and how you got involved, because you're not only in it, you're the co-producer, is that right? Or
associate producer is my
producer.
official title, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Terry, how long ago was it, Terry, you sent that
I
we
guess
talked?
1991 was the first draft.
Was it?
Yeah.
So that long ago, was it,
Yeah.
that we first talked? We have a friend in common, Liam Neeson, who...
Who was just here this week.
Oh, was he? Oh,
Yes.
really? Yeah. Well, he knew Terry before I did, and he'd called me up and said, I've got this, great friend, writer called Terry George, and he's got a script that I think you should look at. And that was my first awareness of the script. At that particular time, the peace process was very much not in place. It was a time of quite of a lot of violence in England, Britain, and I was very wary of, as a British person, becoming involved in something.
Wary because?
Wary, well, also because the script was, I think, was quite different at that time. At least my perception of it was very different. It was more political and less a human story, which is what it eventually became. But anyway, so Terry and I talked over the years. The peace process came into place. Castle Rock wanted to do a film with me and with Terry and Jim, and this was the script that we presented to them, and they very kindly gave us the money to make it.
Why'd you get involved as an associate producer? Because you wanted to...
Well, I guess originally I took the script to Castle Rock.
Okay.
That was basically...
You were the linkage to
yes,
the
yes.
distributor.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell me the story.
Yes.
What story are you telling here?
Well, it's the story of mothers in war. This was an event that for me, because I grew up in West Belfast and lived there during 1981, was the defining moment in the Troubles. Not because it was any more horrific or spectacular than a whole series of atrocities or conflict or violence, but because on this unique occasion, families, mothers particularly, were dragged into the hunger strike and at a key moment asked to choose decide the fate of their sons, because the mothers and the families became aware through doctors and the church and the British government that when Bobby Sands and his fellow hunger strikers lapsed into a coma, that legally the parents then had the right to intervene and take their sons off the hunger strike. And in doing,
if they didn't do that, then they would die from
and that was their son's wish. So this one event seemed to catapult the Northern Ireland situation out into a story that everyone could understand, because basically it was a choice of personal sacrifice or family. And I wanted to tell that story. And at the same time, there was something so unique and bizarre and courageous and pathetic and sad about the hunger strike and about the mothers, their courage and their pathos that I wanted to get across.
You were just in Britain, you said to me before we started. And at least a British interviewer was attacking you in a hard-nosed way. Why? What's the issue for this interviewer? What was it? Was it the fact that, as some critics point out, that they think the British are caricatured here, or stereotypical, that they seem to have no sort of compassion or humane values, while
I don't
most
think
of that...
It's not as simple as that. In fact, some of our... I mean, there was a very mixed reaction in Britain. The reviewers, the artistic community, if you like, saw the film absolutely for what it was, including the reviewers in some of the most establishment press, like the Daily Telegraph, the Times. But some of the editorial, the very particularly extremely right-wing editorial, You know, in Britain, we don't have the attempt to be bipartisan that you do in your American press. There are very, very partisan newspapers. And I think as far as these extreme right-wing journalists were concerned, I think they find it impossible to see any film about Northern Ireland objectively. That's my only explanation, because the extremity of some of the reactions from those people was that they just weren't watching
What's
the film.
their complaint is what I'm asking.
They said it was pro-IRA, basically.
Pro-IRA, and you don't see it that way?
Absolutely not.
Do you see it that way, too?
No. In fact, funny enough, the IRA don't see it that way.
No, exactly.
And what are they saying?
Well, they said it was dodgy politics, and
They wanted you to have a clear point of view, and you didn't.
that I minimised the hunger strike at the expense of the political story over these, what they call some wishy-washy liberal story about women, which is, you know...
Is that what they said, wishy-washy women's story?
Well, yeah, that's the context. It's not the exact words, but that was the basic review in An Phoblacht, which is the Republican Movement's newspaper. But this is a subject in the British Isles that no one is neutral on. People who are neutral are, you know, subjectively neutral almost, or like actively neutral. There's no one that has an opinion on Northern Ireland that doesn't get quite, you know, angry and
what's
strong about it. My opinion is that in the last 2 years we had an opportunity to resolve this genuinely, and that there were people in all factions, the British government, the Irish government, Sinn Féin, the loyalist parties, who genuinely wanted to see an end of this. And yet none of them could find the foresight to get beyond particular positions that they had dug themselves into. And you know, I think it's particularly sad now that it boiled down again to the politics of the British Parliament, because the British Parliament was on such a knife edge of division that ultimately the peace process fell apart.
I mean, it's our job as artists to kind of get up their noses, you know.
Get up their noses, is that a British expression?
Oh, yeah, you don't have that here. I don't know, what's the equivalent American expression?
Get up their noses is pretty good.
Get up their noses and irritate them. And we successfully, which to me is an absolute mark of the success of the film, we successfully irritated both sides because we were telling a story about people, and politicians, as much as they love to kiss babies and pretend that they're speaking for the people, really are not ultimately, in my view, speaking for the people at all. They're speaking for their own agendas. And this film is very much a story of the personal within the political. It's not a political story at all. It's very much a personal story.
It is the story also, though, that in the battle over political issues, there are victims who are with very personal stories.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what you do.
Absolutely.
Victims
yes,
and heroines. I mean, I don't think it's a victim film in that the two women ultimately are, you know...
They discover each other's...
Their strength, and you get the real strength of women, and particularly mothers, in this film, and that's what I was most interested in, because the burning image for me at the time of the hunger strike was the continuing sort of rota of women emerging from that prison to say that their sons had died or that they'd taken their sons off. And the immense dignity and strength that they had transcended everything else almost. And that's what I was most interested in. And I was blessed with two of the best actors in the world, you know, Helen and Fionnuala Flanagan, who pulled this off.
Take a look at this. I think we'll see in this clip Fionnuala Flanagan as well. In fact, we will. This is where you have just gotten... your son has been able to pass you a message that Bobby Sands wants to send to the IRA about the beginning of the hunger strike, and she knows that anyway, here it is, and you'll see this conflict in this drama between these two women who've just visited their sons and realize that they have a message to take to the IRA about the beginning of the hunger strike. Roll tape.
So what's in this message?
I don't know.
It will not be used as some stooge for violence.
All I know is that Bobby Sands needed to get a message out.
Well, I'm going to read this bloody message. Give me that. Give me that. That's IRA business. Mrs. Quigley.
No. My friend, the Brits have finally forced us to live in our own dirt. The lad's morale is collapsing. If you cannot find a solution, then we must push this crisis to its conclusion by going on hunger strike. I'm not threatening you, but stating the cold reality. Your friend and comrade, Bobby Sands.
Tell me about working with her. I mean, we know how good you are, but she was...
Yes, she was wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, Fionnuala lives in America, in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
but she's very active within the Irish Republican movement in America and a great supporter of republicanism. I'm British, so it was not that we come from opposite sides, far from it, because I'm also a supporter of republicanism in a sense.
When you say you're a supporter of republicanism, what does that mean?
Well,
You want to see Northern Ireland become part of the Republic of Ireland?
Get away from me.
What is this time? I'm coming up your nose, Helen.
You're getting up my nose now, Charlie.
British journalist.
Just exactly what is it you're saying, Miss Mirren?
Question.
You know, I mean, what are your politics? If you want to make a movie, you owe it to us to tell us what
I
your
think
politics are.
Ireland-
You can't escape this by being some artist.
I believe in Ireland as an independent country. It is luckily now an independent country. I don't think.
Well,
anyway,
we all believe in Ireland
let's,
being an independent country. It is an independent country.
Yeah.
The question is whether
We
you
were
believe
talking
that
about
Northern
Fionnuala.
Ireland should be part of the Republic of Ireland and whether the British ought to have some remaining connection with Northern Ireland, isn't it?
it's really. I don't know. I know what. I think I know what will happen.
That's what I want to know. What do you think will happen?
I think that eventually Ireland will be united. That's what I
It'll
think.
be part of Europe, like all the rest of
Yeah.
Europe, and you know we'll all be
But
European.
let me come back to you, because I know
But,
you're more than, I mean, you've had some real involvement in this.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you
It's
go to
for-
prison?
Charlie,
For
you
how
know,
long?
3 years.
3 years.
Long case.
What did you do?
I was arrested for a firearms offence. I was in a car and someone was carrying guns, and everyone in the car was sentenced, found guilty. And
Did you know nothing about it?
well, I knew the guy who was in the car was, you know, an activist,
carry-on,
and either did or didn't. So it wasn't that I didn't know anything about it, but
And what did that experience do to you?
well, it gave me a career, strangely enough.
So you began to write about the IRA and
Well,
to write
yeah,
about the
yeah,
conflict.
but you know, it was writing about more than that. It was writing about the experience of a divided society. So, but yeah, it was a bizarre place because the place that I was in was a prisoner of war camp. It had, you know, gun towers and soldiers with dogs and spotlights and little Nissan huts and barbed wire and people who marched around and behaved like prisoners of war.
And you were treated as a prisoner of war.
Yeah, political status it was called, and it was the removal of that recognition that led to the hunger strike.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, within Northern Ireland, it was all these strategies that were designed to solve the problem rather than getting to the peace table.
I interrupted Helen. Helen thinks that, in fact, that there will be, you know, a uniting of Northern Ireland into Ireland. Fair to say.
Yes.
What you just said. And you believe that too, or you would sort of say, well, we'll all be in Europe, so
But I mean,
with a common currency.
that sounds. I mean, that sounds like a wishy-washy way
It
of
does.
getting out of it. But in fact, if you've been to the south of Ireland lately, they've benefited so much from the European Union that evolution now is a part.
in terms of economics.
And socially and culturally as well, they have a European perspective that has changed the place quite dramatically in the last 20 years. And so that evolution could take place if we weren't bogged down in the particular political division that exists or not.
You like this directing thing?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, it's control freak thing.
It's
you know?
easy. Look what you had to work with. I mean,
It is,
This
that's
was not
true.
hard.
Yeah, it's just keeping the stamina.
You made it for about $8 million, did I read, or much more? About 8?
Yeah.
Good for
Yeah.
you. Are you making more prime suspects?
No, I've done my last one, but the last one's going to air here, I think, in February.
Why did we have to stop this?
Because things have to come to an end, and it's better for them to come to an end while they're still hot and good and creative
Yeah.
than when they're not anymore. And it was time for me to move on.
Like John Cleese said, I stopped making faulty towers because I had I realized I couldn't keep making as good as we'd been making.
Yeah,
it.
that's right. That's
You know,
pretty
I've
well
sort
it.
of done
I
it.
mean, yeah. I think we could. I think we could do a couple more, but I personally want to move on. That's all.
You just won an award last year, Golden Globe for that television.
That
thing
was
you-
for Losing Chase.
Right.
Mm.
Great to see you.
You too.
Terry,
Thank you.
pleasure to meet you. Terry George directed Some Mother's Son, starring Helen Mirren. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you Monday night.